now we all can say at least we came to Greenland, closer to Greenland because of you. So we yeah, last week we started the book of Chronicles, which you know we'll get into a little bit more when it becomes the real getting to the real thing. By the way, I'm coming to you from San Diego, which we may be here a few times. We're it's a longer story than necessary here, but we have a little we're here a little bit now, especially Tracy, and I've I'm switching with her. She's up in LA and I'm down here for the Hog, for the beginning of the Hog, because everybody should be in San Diego for Sukkot. And so yeah, we're very excited to start the holiday today, everybody together. We're also, of course, basking in taking it to the Phillies again last night for all of our Dodger fans who are here. Uh, we
Pretty scary though last night.
Okay, we know, Mike. We don't have to. We all got nervous when Blake Trinan came in, so enough already. We don't have to keep giving him chances. He's had enough. He's had enough chance.
Exactly.
Now it's clear that he's not.
Roki.
It's not reliable. And Blake was just unbelievable. I mean,
Oh, wasn't he?
I was just made them look foolish. So we're on Facebook now and we're recording. And so for people who were not here last week and we did not have a chance to start with us Chronicles, what we did last week and what you missed was a restatement of pretty much Genesis, specifically focusing on the nations and on the ways that the world was split up. And then we got into the tribes last week in chapter 4. And now in chapter 5, where we're starting today, we did the first tribe that they listed, which was the tribe of Judah, which is really the focus of of Chronicles. Chronicles is really telling the story of the tribe of Judah, the kingdom of Judah, and specifically the dynasty that was established by King David. As I mentioned just now, when we get into where Chronicles and is really the bulk of Chronicles, after today, we're going to be getting into the into a kind of, and I'll just show you kind of what we'll get into when we get to it. But Chronicles, especially the last half of the first book of Chronicles and Second Chronicles, is a retelling of a lot of what we read about in Kings, with some very glaring omissions. Primarily, anything and I mentioned this last week again. Apologies for repeating this. Really, no concern whatsoever for the Northern Kingdom at all, including the prophets of the Northern Kingdom like Elijah and Elisha, who are obviously very important in the Book of Kings and very important in our consciousness. We talk about Elijah all the time. We just finished uh, you know, Yom Kippur Havdalah with Elijah. We finish Shabbat Havdalah with Elijah, uh, and he's not mentioned here. And so, if you only had the books of Chronicles, you wouldn't really know about what was going on in the northern kingdoms and with the northern prophets. And we'll talk about that more when we get to it. But it is relevant to this discussion because we just went through a listing of the tribe of Judah in chapter 4, and now we get to the first of the tribes, if you will, chronologically, at least from the birth of their birth order, which is Reuben. And so we're going to get into this now. And again, this is really a restatement of Genesis. Um, Aside from Genesis, though, we really are going to step into, for the most part in Chronicles, the books of Samuel and Kings, really focusing on the dynasty of King David and his family. And when we get into that, we'll talk about what is and what isn't there between those. So far, again, it's not really a restatement of the book of Genesis, other than the chapters of the nations, which is in chapters 10 of Genesis, when we get through the 70 nations, if you will. And now we're kind of like maybe in Genesis chapter 30, in the 30s, when we get into the tribes, the birth of the sons of Jacob and into the tribes. Uh, so um, let's take a look at this, and we'll take a look at um, well, kind of why these other tribes did not get to have the prestige and the importance and the really didn't have the impact on Jewish history that these other tribes um, had compared to Judah. So I'll get that kind of fan out of there. It's kind of distracting. And so let's Rosemary, if you'd be so kind to take us through the chapter 5 of Chronicles.
The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. He was the firstborn, but when he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, son of Israel. So he is not reckoned as firstborn in the genealogy. Though Judah became more powerful than his brothers and a leader came from him, yet the birthright belonged to Joseph.
Now, that's not all they're going to say about that, but it's really important because they're going back to Genesis, they're mining Genesis, and this is one of the ways, and it's interesting because tomorrow night, for those who want to join us for Wednesday night, please come anytime for the Jewish journey. Tomorrow we're going to look at how the Torah and the Tanakh were edited and put together. I'd say written, but that'll be touched on. But really, all we can talk about is editing and compilation, and to some extent, Chronicles is an interesting book because it shows us how editing was done in the Bible, and and maybe gives us some clues about how it was edited earlier when we talk about the book of Genesis and how the Torah was edited together. But what's interesting here is that this is all going back to Genesis. I mean, nothing here that they've referred to is not. It's all in the book of Genesis. You don't have to go further than than Genesis. But what the author of Chronicles has just done is essentially explained how Genesis set the community of Judah and Israel into the way it was during much of the next several hundred years, which is that Reuben should have been the head of the tribes after his father's death. Reuben should have been as the eldest, but we know that Joseph ends up getting the birthright and the blessing, even though he's the second youngest. Benjamin is the ultimate youngest, but Joseph is the next youngest. But again, he was chosen by Jacob to be the inheritor. And of course, we read the story of how his brothers almost killed him and how Joseph winds up helping to save his family in Egypt. All of this tells us that, yes, Joseph should have had the birthright, but he also doesn't. Judah does. Reuben, it Genesis tells us that Reuben basically took advantage of his father's concubine, Bilhah, and sleeps with her, or, again, defiled his father's bed is a nice way of saying he engaged in behavior that disqualified him from being the inheritor, and Joseph ended up getting it, both because of Reuben's behavior and what Joseph and to some extent Benjamin do. I mean, how the children of Rachel kind of saved the community. But what's interesting is Judah still winds up being the one in charge. And all of this kind of explains how, Judah is the focus of the story. And I guess you could say the authors want to make sure you understand why it is that the orders of the tribes aren't the way the birth order did not determine how leadership fell, but it really doesn't explain how Judah wound up in charge. It basically just tells you how Reuben wasn't in charge, how Joseph should have been in charge, but there really isn't a good explanation how Judah became the ones in charge. Not from Genesis, because you could even make the argument that while Judah is one of the brothers who tries to save Joseph, you don't get from that he's going to be the one who's going to wind up being the most powerful and the one, quite frankly, that we're the descendants of. So the author of Chronicles, the editors of this book, and I remember originally there was only one book. It was split up later. It was split up by later pretty much in the Christian period, by Christian biblical scholars, because in the Talmud it's still not broken up. We just call it Chronicles. It's not Chronicles 1 and 2. But this is a really important thing, which we get one line about, or two lines, but really one line about Judah, and it just says he became more powerful. It doesn't say exactly how. So definitely refers to, Genesis, the story of Reuben in chapter 35, which, by the way, it's not an extensive story. I mean, let me just show you real quick the story. The line. I mean, there's literally one line of what happens. And so, I mean, I'll just show you the let's just see. Rachel died. Rachel died.
You just passed it.
I know. I
There
just
it
want.
is.
So Rachel died, and then it says they traveled on, and this is it. While Israel stayed in the land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel found out. Right, and that's it. Right, that's all it says. Now, it's not all it says, because when it comes to the end of his life, when Jacob is blessing his children, he has not forgotten. And, we'll just show you the very, very end. So that this is part of the consciousness well, let's just say it's the consciousness of Genesis. And we do not forget what he did. So when Jacob is blessing his children, he blesses them. And this is what he says about Reuben. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and first fruit of my vigor, exceeding in rank and exceeding in unstable as water, you shall excel no longer. For when you mounted your father's bed, you brought disgrace. My couch he mounted. So again, that's how Reuben winds up not being in charge, but it doesn't really say how Joseph didn't. But it that's what we have to basically then allow for the tribes to be listed here. And of course, here after Judah, it starts with Reuben. Here we go.
The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, Enoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Yoel, his son Shemaiah, his son Gog, his son Shimei, his son Micah, his son Reaiah, his son Baal, his son Beerah, whom King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria exiled, was chieftain of the Reubenites.
Yeah. And so you see Reuben's descendants, which according to this are not that many between Reuben, and then the exile by the Syrians. So the Assyrian exile is around 700 BCE. So there's not that much time between, according to this, not that many generations between Reuben and their 700, right? And so there you have like no description of the Assyrian exile, of how the northern tribes were, the northern kingdom was taken away. And it's just they were taken away. And we will get to taken away and exiled, is why I say that, and not lost, because the Bible at least never tells us that they're lost. On the contrary, it tells us where they are. Maybe they're lost today, maybe, or some of them are lost today, but the Bible doesn't say they're lost. Okay.
And his kindred by their families, according to their lines in the genealogy. The head, Yael and Zechariah, and Bela, son of Azaz, son of Shema, son of Yoel. He dwelt in Aroer as far as Nebo and Baal-meon. He also dwelt to the east, as far as the fringe of the wilderness this side of the Euphrates, because their cattle had increased in the land of Gilead. And in the days of Saul, they made war on the Hagrites, who fell by their hand, and they occupied their tents throughout all the region east of Gilead.
Yeah, and so the Reubenites, and again, according to the book of Numbers and kind of Joshua and where the tribes are, Reuben winds up on the other side of the Jordan River in today's Jordan. And this basically tells us that they went all the way up north into Gilad, which is the Golan Heights. And so, they're they're interesting partly because, and they're listed partly first because they're the oldest tribe, the eldest son's tribe. But what's also interesting is that they're also geographically furthest to the east. And they're the ones that are, to some extent, going to get taken away the fastest because they're not on the other side of the Jordan. Again, we've mentioned this many times. The Jordan River is not a really great geographical boundary between two countries. It never really was until 1947 a good boundary. It's not a big enough river to be a natural boundary, to be a topographical boundary maker barrier. It doesn't function that way. It hasn't functioned that way. And almost any country that controlled one side of the Jordan controlled the other side of the Jordan. That's another way of proving that. But regardless, in the minds of this author, a lot of this is because they're the ones that get taken away first. You'll see.
The sons of God dwelt facing them in the land of Bashan as far as Salchat. Yoel the chief, Shaphan the second, Yanai, and Shaphat in Bashan. And by clans, Michael, Meshulam, Sheva, Yorai, Yakan, Zia, and Eber, 7. These were the sons of Abihail, son of Huri, son of Yaroah, son of Gilead, son of Michael, son of Yeshishai, son of Yado, son of Buz. Ahi, son of Abdiel, son of Guni, was chief of their clan. And they dwelt in Gilead, in Bashan and its dependencies, and in all the pasture lands of Sharon to their limits.
Keep going.
All of them were registered by genealogies in the days of King Jotam of Judah and in the days of King Jeroboam of Israel.
Yeah, and so it's what it tells us is that um, we know these genealogies from the times of King Jotam in Judah and King Jeroboam of Israel. Now, it has told us who the king of who the king of Israel is. So there is an acknowledgement of the king of Israel, right? There is a there's not a denial of it, but there's not a lot of discussion about it. And when we talk about, this period of what's going on at this time, um, this is this is a time between those two guys, Jeroboam and Yotam, is uh, is interesting because both of them were kings for uh, during a time when, and they ruled at a time. This is Jeroboam the second, not the first Jeroboam, where this is this Jeroboam ruled for over 40 years, and so this takes us just up to before the time of the exile of those northern tribes when they were taken away. But I would put it this way: the relevance of this, or the reason to include this to kind of discussion, is because they're really only talking about the northern kingdoms in the context of their destruction. It's not really anything other. There's nothing else on the mind of this author other than that. There's not a huge, we'll see. You'll see. It's not it's not a preoccupation of them to talk about it. I guess, as I said, and they really only talk about it in the context of they're going to be gone. All right, here we go, and this is why we had these tribes first mentioned.
The Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh had warriors who carried shield and sword, drew the bow, and were experienced at war, 44,760 ready for service. They made war on the Hagrites, Yetur, Naphish, and Nadab. They prevailed against them. The Hagrites and all who were with them were delivered into their hands, for in the battle they cried to God, who responded to their entreaty because they trusted in God. They carried off their livestock, 50,000 of their camels, 250,000 sheep, 2,000 donkeys, and 100,000 people. For many fell slain because it was God's battle, and they dwelt in their place until the exile. The members of the half tribe of Manasseh dwelt in the land. They were very numerous, from Bashan to Baal Hermon, Senir, and Mount Hermon.
And you can see that this is, again, the mention of these tribes is not so much, well, it's not really because of Reuben being the eldest. They're really focused on first on telling us what happens on that side of the Jordan River. It's more of a geographical concern than anything else. I mean, it might have been placed there because of Reuben, and they want to tell us kind of like what happened to them, and then, but that's why Gad and Manasseh are there. Gad and Manasseh tribes are there because of their. I mean, you could say it this way: they're there because they're there at the beginning because of the Reubenites, and then they're talking about all the tribes on that side of the Jordan River, and that's how they wound up. That's how they wound up there. Again, this battle that they're describing against the Hagrites, we don't really have this discussion in outside of Chronicles, put it that way. So it obviously could be in the Book of Kings. It could be it can be going back all the way to Judges. It doesn't really say when this was taking place because it talked about them going to war against the Hagrites, but it doesn't say who led them into battle, right? It just kind of like is telling us that. We also aren't like 100% sure who the Hagrites are. We assume that they're connected somehow to Hagar because they definitely seem to be Arab peoples. They're Arab nomads. Um, they live in tents. By the way, I'm telling you the clues here. They have camels, they have sheep, and they have donkeys, but they have camels. And the Arabs had camels. That was one of their things. They were camel people. And they had tents. And so they seem to be Arab nomadic people. Hagar, we know, is the ancestor of Ishmael. And so it kind of like makes sense that it's Hagar, but it's very rare for a tribe to be identified by the matriarchal ancestor of them. It's not impossible. And again, it could be that like she's called Hagar because they wanted to link her to Abraham. They wanted to link the Arabs to Abraham, and Hagar made sense, maybe, because there was these people they called the Hagarites. But we don't know. We really don't know, other than they're mentioned here. And they're mentioned here, and they seem to be Arab. There's like every indication that these are Arabs. And the and these tribes, these two and a half tribes, are successful against them and wind up with a lot of their property. But again, it ends with this until they were exiled. Okay.
These were the chiefs of their clans: Epher, Ishi, Eliel, Azriel, Jeremiah, Hodaviah, and Yadiel, men of substance, famous men, chiefs of their clans. But they trespassed against the God of their ancestors by going astray after the gods of the peoples of the land, whom God had destroyed before them. So the God of Israel roused the spirit of King Pul of Assyria, the spirit of King Telegat-Pilneser of Assyria, and he carried them away, namely the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and brought them to Halah, Habor, Harah, and the river Gozan to this day.
Okay, so whenever Chronicles was finished, which we assume is probably like the 6th century, about 150, 200 years after, maybe even 250 years after the exile. So the exile happened in the 700s. This is written, let's say, edited. The person who just wrote to this day is probably living in the 500s or maybe the 400s. So it's like 200 years, 250 years later, which means they were not lost. 200 years later, they know where the tribes are. They're living in areas that are currently Iraq and Iran, Persia, Persian Empire, Babylonians. They're in that area. Okay. So they're not lost. They know exactly where they are. The descendants of those tribes are in that area. Uh, I mean, talking about, far from Israel, but not far from where Jews were living during the Babylonian exile. When the Babylonians exiled the Judeans, they're not that far away from them. Gozan is probably like pretty far in the east in Persia, in what's today Iran. But it's also very possible we're talking about like areas around the Euphrates River, right? Chabor these are areas we know about even in the Talmudic period. Now, what happened to these people? It's very possible you could see, it's already said, they were already not worshiping God, which upset this author. They were already, again, they trespassed by going after the gods of the land, meaning probably again Canaanite gods like Baal, which we just saw one of them was named Baal. One of those ancestors is already named Baal in Reuben's tribe. So they were already not being they already were not doing the right thing when it came to their worship as it was. Did they continue that when they went into exile? It's possible. It's possible that they, disappeared and assimilated in, but it's also very possible that they assimilated into the Jewish community that was exiled during the Babylonian exile. because they're living in the same area. Is it possible that the Reubenites and Gadites and Manassites also kind of gravitated back to, if they wanted to, back to the Judeans who are also now living in their midst? It's very possible. It's very possible that they became part of these. I mean, we know that there were already diaspora communities that function, and they function after the Jews return, because we've talked about it. And we talked about it again when we read Ezra and Nehemiah. The Jews who went back with Ezra and Nehemiah were not the majority of Jews that went into exile. We don't know how many, but there's hundreds of thousands of Jews that don't go back. And we know some of them. Their names are Mordecai and Esther. They could have gone back. Mordecai and Esther could have been back with Ezra and Nehemiah back in the land of Israel. They didn't live there. I want to make it clear. Mordecai, who again seems to have done very well in the end by rising up in the court, he didn't want to go back, or he didn't choose to go back. He didn't go back. I mean, we don't talk about that a lot, but he willingly lived in exile, or lived in exile when he could have lived in Israel. So we don't know what happens to these people for sure, because at least by this time we know where they are, and they're identifiable. They're identifiable. So to say that they're lost, the 10 lost tribes, or the lost tribes, or however many of those tribes were still in exile, or had been exiled, and even in the first place, you know, you don't say that they're lost, at least yet. In the biblical period, this is the last book of the Bible, folks. They are not lost in the Bible. Now, if we talk about these tribes that are on this side, and we already know, as Judith just texted, yes, even then, people were important in exile, in the diaspora, because they supported and they were part of the Jewish community that existed, and probably not a good idea for all Jews to be in one place anyways. But yeah, this is, and we know for a fact that the tribe of Shimon, we already read last week, they were absorbed by the Judites. So that's one tribe that, well, I guess they got lost, but they got lost in Judah. They're lost in Judah. Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at the next tribe that's listed, which also didn't disappear. Maybe that's one of the interesting things. These tribes totally don't disappear. The next tribe, well, we still know who these people are today, and that's the Levites.
The sons of Levi, Gershom, Kohat, and Merari. The sons of Kohat, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. The children of Amram, Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. The sons of Aaron, Nadav, Abihu, Eleazar, and Itamar.
Well, let's pause right there. This is one of the few places in the Bible, anywhere in the Bible, where it says the children of Amram are Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. Very rarely will it call out all those three together and say, these were the children of Amram. Now, it lists them before Aaron. Now, of course, Aaron was older. We know that. Aaron was older than Moses, but Moses is there, and they mention him. And of course, they mention Amram's, essentially, again, Moses and Aaron's uncles, Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. And then, of course, we're going to get into Aaron's sons, because Aaron's sons are the ones that are critical for the priesthood and for what we know about later in the Bible, and to some extent to this very day. Let's look.
Eleazar begot Pinchas, Pinchas begot Abishua, Abishua begot Buki, Buki begot Uzi, Uzi begot Zahariah, Zerahiah begot Mariot, Mariot begot Amariah, Amariah begot Ahituv, Ahituv begot Zadok, Zadok begot Ahimaaz. Ahimaaz begot Azariah. Azariah begot Yohanan, and Yohanan begot Azariah. It was he who served as priest in the house that Solomon built in Jerusalem. Azariah begot Amariah. Amariah begot Ahituv. Ahituv begot Zadok. Zadok begot Shallum. Shallum begot Hilkiah. Hilkiah begot Azariah. Azariah begot Sariah. Sariah begot Jehozadak. And Jehozadak went into exile when God exiled Judah and Jerusalem by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah. Now that is a very precise genealogy. Yeah. It seems very precise. Going all the way back to Aaron, then to Eleazar, then to Pinchas, who's mentioned, of course, in the Bible, in the book of Numbers. And again, Pinchas is Aaron's grandson, but again, becomes a very powerful high priest in his own right. These are not the only kids that any of these guys had, right? All these, well, I'm not saying all of them had multiple children and definitely multiple sons, but some of them did, but they're not here. The reason is because they don't care. They only care, the author of this only cares about one thing, which is how did we get to this guy, Jehozadak? And how did we get to this guy? And how did we get to this guy? These are the people who become high priests because their father was priest. They had brothers. Some of them definitely had brothers. Maybe not all of them, but some of them had brothers. They became priests, but they didn't become the high priest. These are people who are the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, and it gets us all the way through to the exile. And most likely, if this person is not a descendant of those people, he's very close to the descendants of those people and is very of all those people, but of course to the end, to the last people. And while these people are all, I mean, we assume most of these high priests were doing important things, they really only care about when the temple was established, and again, to some extent, when the temple was destroyed. So it's not a comprehensive list by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't have all the priests listed here. It doesn't have really much about these other people. This dude is super important because Ahitub's son Sadok is where we get the word Sadokites, where we get the word Sadducees from. Again, he's not the only Sadok. There's also, wait a second. This is actually, yeah, that's the other place where he's listed, where we get through this list of the priests. We know that Ezra is one of these priests. He's from this family. He's not a high priest. He's not the priest that will become the one who's in charge of overseeing the temple, the one who gets to go on Yom Kippur and cleanse the temple. He's not the high priest, Ezra, but he's from the family. He's from the family of priests. And each one of these people, to some extent, if this is a dynasty, this is a priestly dynasty. And it's definitely a big concern of the person who writes Chronicles, who's either a priest or someone who really cares about the priesthood at a level that, he's doing a lot of genealogies. As we mentioned, it's very likely that Ezra and Nehemiah, the author, probably Ezra, wrote this too. There's very strong similarities in language between this and the book of Ezra. And it seems like, again, the person who wrote this was somebody who is deeply concerned with establishing good genealogies, good lineages, and making sure that people are pure, right? They're not married to people outside of the faith. that they're not worshiping other gods, and that they've got good yichus, as we say, is they have good ancestry. That's what just happened. We just had one of those established. So that's the priests. Those are the Kohanim. Now we step back in chapter 6 to read about the rest of the Levites, the other tribe, the rest of the tribe that included, by the way, Moses and his family. So let's take a look.
The sons of Levi, Gershom, Kohath, and Merari. And these are the names of the sons of Gershom, Livni and Shimei. The sons of Kohath, Amram, Ishar, Hebron, and Uziel. The sons of Merari, Machli and Mushi. These were the families of the Levites according to their clans. Of Gershom, his son Livni, his son Yahat, his son Zima, his son Yoah, his son Edo, his son Zerah, his son Yeterai. The sons of Kohath, his son Amminadab, his son Korah, his son Asir, his son Elkanah, his son Aviasaph, his son Asir, his son Tahat, his son Uriel, his son Uzziah, and his son Shaul. The sons of Elkanah, Amasai and Ahimot, his son Elkanah, his son Zaphi, his son Nahat, his son Eliav, his son Yeroham, his son Elkanah. The sons of Samuel, his firstborn, Vashni and Abiah.
Now, this is a weird lineage, if you will, for a few reasons. Well, one of them is when we actually read about these guys, that's not their names. Their names are Joel and Aviah. So it's slightly different that he has this name Vashni here. But yeah, this is the Samuel. This is the Samuel who's Elkanah's son, who we read about. Actually, Judith read this section at Rosh Hashanah, the birth of Samuel. And so it doesn't really call much attention to Samuel. And again, if you didn't know what they're talking about here, you would have missed it. It's not a great description. Interestingly, by the way, one of the things we know about Samuel's sons, Yoel and either, again, Vashni here, which doesn't seem like a very biblical Hebrew name, sounds more like a Persian name, but they were judges in Beersheba, right? Which would have put them during the time of King David. But what does it say about these guys? They were not good guys. They were bent on gain, they accepted bribes, and they subverted justice. And the elders came to Samuel and said, your sons are not good, right? And they get to this king stuff. So these guys are disqualified to some extent because of their behavior, but it really does lead to why we have kings. King Saul and King David were, to some extent, the leaders that his sons couldn't be. So again, they're not priests, they're Levites, they're not Kohanim, they're helping out in the temple. They do a lot of stuff that it seems like Samuel does a lot of stuff that priests do, but one could make the argument, and I'm sharing it because I would be one of those who make that argument. And we've talked about it before. The Bible does a really good job of obscuring a huge civil strife over who really was in charge of the religion and to some extent the power in ancient Israel. Was it the Levites or was it specifically the Kohanim, a subgroup of the Levites? And for a time, it's the Levites. And for several reasons, maybe again, partially because the Levites do not do well, passing on leadership to their sons. The Kohanim do, and it's Aaron's sons and their descendants that wind up being the religious leaders of the country, oftentimes the political leaders, definitely during the time of the Maccabees. They are kings. They're not just priests, they're kings. But the Levites have the power to some extent taken away from them. And at least the Bible doesn't do a great job of explaining it, partially because the Levites aren't the ones who are writing the stories or editing the stories or preserving the stories. It's the Kohanim. And so they're not really giving us the other side of this, which is the Levites did not inherently have good leadership being passed down through the generations. It's not talked a lot about by anybody, really. It's not talked about in the Bible. It's not really dealt with by biblical scholars, other than they acknowledge it. But look at it. Samuel's sons are schnooks. Samuel had a similar situation because he took over from his predecessor, Eli, whose sons Hophni and Pinchas were schnooks. And we don't know a lot about it, though there are some little hints at it, that Moses, who was also one of the main Levite guys, right? Moses can't get more Levite and important than him. His sons also were schnooks. So there's a real problem in the Levites don't really put up a good, they don't put up a solid set of at least, having a solid patrilineal line of good leaders, and the Kohanim were, and for whatever reason, that's the way it went. And the Kohanim, Aaron's descendants end up being the ones who lead us. All right.
The sons of Merari, Machli, his son Libni, his son Shimei, his son Uzzah, his son Shemaiah, his son Haggiah, his son Asaiah. These were appointed by David to be in charge of song in the house of God from the time the ark came to rest. They served at the tabernacle of the tent of meeting with song until Solomon built the house of God in Jerusalem, and they carried out their duties as prescribed for them. Those were the appointed ones, and their sons were the Kohathites, Heman the singer, son of Yoel, son of Samuel, son of Elkanah, son of Jeraham, son of Eliel, son of Toah, son of Zeus, son of Elkanah, son of Mahat, son of Amasai, son of Elkanah, son of Yoel, son of Azariah, son of Zephaniah, son of Tahat, son of Asir, son of Ephiasaph, son of Korah, son of Ishar, son of Kohat, son of Levi, son of Israel, and his kinsman Asaph, who stood on his...
Hold on one second. So that's a weird one, because it's a reverse. It was a reverse of, it went back to Levi through this guy Haman. You understand? So it went kind of backwards. So Samuel's grandson was Haman. So it went backwards to Levi through Kohath. And these guys are the ones who are in charge of, at least in this case, being the singers. But you see also the Levites originally, when the ark comes into Jerusalem initially, the Levites seem to be the ones in charge. And by the time Solomon is establishing what he does, it's the Kohanim, it's the priests that are doing the work. So this stuff starts to fall apart for the Levites, if you will. Well, I shouldn't say starts to fall apart, but by this point, it becomes not their deal. By the time of Solomon, this doesn't work out. And so the Kohanim win. And when they win, by the way, they win for Jerusalem. And that's probably the biggest issue, which is that David and especially Solomon, they want to consolidate the religion in Jerusalem. They don't want Levites running around the country doing sacrifices anywhere. They only want sacrifices in Jerusalem. And to some extent, the Kohanim go along with that. And while it means that they only get to live and work in Jerusalem, I'm reconstructing for you what I think is the real story, which is that the people who consolidated power in Jerusalem made a decision to say, we're not going to have people run, they're not going to run shrines outside of Jerusalem, and we're going to consolidate it here. The trade-off is you have to live here. You can't live anywhere else. And we're going to make sure that you have the power, the religious power to do all this stuff, but you're going to have to live here, and that's the trade-off. So it's kind of like you're going to have to live in Washington, D.C., but you're going to have a tremendous amount of power while you're here. But you have to be here. You can't go back to your homes, or you can't live outside of Jerusalem and do your religious stuff anymore. It's kind of a wild thing. It was a big, big thing. It was a big deal. All right. It's not talked a lot about, and it's definitely, you don't catch it in the Bible, but it's huge. All right, let's look what happens with the rest of the Levites.
Where are we?
His kinsman Asaph.
His kinsman Asaph, who stood on his right, namely Asaph, son of Berechiah, son of Shemaiah, son of Michael, son of Baasiah, son of Malchiah, son of Esni, son of Zerah, son of Adiah, son of Ethan, son of Zima, son of Shimei, son of Yahat, son of Gershom, son of Levi.
And they went back to him, back through Gershom, back to Levi. So that's another guy, Asaph. And we know about these people because they are mentioned in Psalms. The Psalms of Asaph are mentioned, and look, there are people who say that all this stuff is made up. I don't believe it. And most people don't believe it anymore. But the people who ran biblical studies departments for a long time, pretty much for the last 20, 25 years, were called minimalists because they believed that all this stuff was made up. It doesn't seem made up, and we're discovering more archaeological evidence that it wasn't made up. But part of their argument was there was an absence of archaeology. Well, now that there's more of that archaeology, and a lot of it's been recovered, they've gone back to a more maximalist approach. It's not full maximalism. Maximalism at its full extent is everything in the Bible is exactly the way it says it is. It's not that, but it's also not this is all made up. And again, that's where we were for a long period of time, was people just treated this as made up stuff. And gosh, I mean, one of the reasons why instinctively I did not think it was made up is because it doesn't, the stuff that's here, you understand why they're saying it. They wouldn't have made it up because, number one, it doesn't make sense to make up stuff that makes you look like an idiot. And number two, the level of detail to it kind of bears in mind that, okay, maybe we don't know all the information. Maybe there's some mistakes in the genealogies, but it doesn't appear like they're just making up names that like they didn't have. They might have been not 100% precise, but that doesn't mean it's all wrong or it's all made up. So just again, you'll hear those terms, maximalists and minimalists. The maximalists are almost, again, the full extent of it, the full version of them. These are people who believe that every word in the Bible is accurate. And the minimalists are basically, this is all fantasy. And most people are on the spectrum. Yeah. And again, we're going to talk about it tomorrow night.
On the left were their kindred, the sons of Merari, Etan, son of Kishi, son of Abdi, son of Maluk, son of Hashabiah, son of Amaziah, son of Hilkiah, son of Amzi, son of Bani, son of Shemer, son of Mahli, son of Mushi, son of Merari, son of Levi. And their kindred, the Levites, were appointed for all the service of the tabernacle of the house of God.
And there you go. Again, backwards from Merari back to Levi as well. So again, this guy, Eitan, and we also have Psalms of Eitan mentioned in the Psalms, and there you go. So yeah, now back to the Kohanim.
But Aaron and his sons made offerings upon the altar of burnt offering and upon the altar of incense, performing all the tasks of the most holy place to make atonement for Israel, according to all that Moses, the servant of God, had commanded.
And by the way, that's a little, I would say dig, but it's definitely propaganda, right? Which is we do that stuff. Well, so the author who we believe is an Aaronite is a Kohan from the Kohanim. It's basically saying, yeah, and we do all the stuff that we are supposed to do.
These are the sons of Aaron, his son Eleazar, his son Phinehas, his son Abishua, his son Buki, his son Uzzi, his son Zerahiah, his son Meraiot, his son Amariah, his son Ahituv, his son Zadok, his son Ahimaaz.
Yeah, and we had this already. So if this sounds really familiar of going through Ahimaaz and Sadok, it's because we had this again already. All right.
These are their dwelling places, according to their settlements within their borders. To the sons of Aaron, of the families of Kohathites, for theirs was the first lot, they gave them Hebron in the land of Judah and its surrounding pasture lands. But the fields of the city and its villages they gave to Caleb, son of Jephunneh. To the sons of Aaron they gave the cities of refuge, Hebron and Livnah with its pasture lands, Yatir and Eshtemoa with its pasture lands, Hilen with its pasture lands, Devir with its pasture lands, Ashan with its pasture lands, and Bet Shemesh with its pasture lands. From the tribe of Benjamin, Geba with its pasture lands, Alemet with its pasture lands, and Anatot with its pasture lands. All their cities throughout their families were 13. To the remaining Kohathites were given by lot out of the family of the tribe, out of the half tribe, the half of Manasseh, 10 cities. To the Gershonites, according to their families, were allotted 13 cities out of the tribes of Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Manasseh in Bashan. To the Merarites, according to their families, were allotted 12 cities out of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Zebulun. So the people of Israel gave the Levites the cities with their pasture lands. They gave them by lot out of the tribe of the Judahites these cities that are mentioned by name, and out of the tribe of the Shimeonites, and out of the tribe of the Benjaminites. And some of the families of the sons of Kohath had cities of their territory out of the tribe of Ephraim. They gave them the cities of refuge, Shechem with its pasture lands in the hill country of Ephraim, Gezer with its pasture lands, Yokmeam with its pasture lands, Bet Horon with its pasture lands, Ajalon with its pasture lands, Gat Rimmon with its pasture lands, and out of the half tribe of Manasseh, Aner with its pasture lands, and Bileam with its pasture lands, for the rest of the families of the Kohathites. To the Gershonites, out of the half tribe of Manasseh, Golan and Bashan with its pasture lands, and Ashtaroth with its pasture lands, and out of the tribe of Issachar, Kadesh with its pasture lands, Dobrat with its pasture lands, Ramoth with its pasture lands, and Anem with its pasture lands. Out of the tribe of Asher, Mashal with its pasture lands, Abdon with its pasture lands, Hukok with its pasture lands, and Rehov with its pasture lands. And out of the tribe of Naphtali, Kadesh in Galilee with its pasture lands, Hamon with its pasture lands, and Kiriatim with its pasture lands. To the rest of the Merarites, out of the tribe of Zebulun, Rimonah with its pasture lands, Tabor with its pasture lands, and beyond the Jordan, at Jericho, on the east side of the Jordan, out of the tribe of Reuben, Bezer in the wilderness with its pasture lands, Yahaz with its pasture lands. To the rest of the Merarites, out of the, where are we?
Kedemot.
Kedemot with its pasture lands, and Mephaat with its pasture lands.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
Okay, I need you to scroll.
Oh, I did. It must have locked.
Ah,
Is it there?
I'm at line 66.
Huh.
Oh, there it goes. And out of the tribe of Gad, Ramoth in Gilead with its pasture lands. Oh, we're stuck again.
Hmm.
Mahanaim with its pasture lands. Stuck again.
I don't know why. It shows it on the screen and it's there.
Hmm.
Is it holding up for everybody? Anybody? Is it holding up for anybody else?
We can only see 66 at this point.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
can't see anything.
That's strange because it says it's doing it. Again, as we're going through this list, we just try. I'm gonna re I'm gonna re put it in here. As we're going through this list, again, it's telling us where the Levites were living, which areas these different Levites were living. And again, for the Kohanim, the most important thing was they lived in Jerusalem and the environs. They got to live in that area. And so the priests that lived there, the Kohanim that lived there, are obviously the ones who are the most powerful. But there's priests that are there are Levites that are living everywhere, all around the country. And when it keeps going through its pasture lands, it's telling you that it's not just the city, but it's also in the Hebrew, it's migrash, the migrash or migrasheha, the it's surrounding areas, it's surrounding kind of villages and fields that were part of that city's. So there would be a town, a city in some cases with walls, and then there would be villages and pastures around it. Those areas were considered part of that city, and so the Levites would be kind of ministering to those people. And it's telling you where they were throughout, again, throughout the land of Israel, in the north and in the south, and also, of course, onto the other side. Every time it's telling you about the cities of refuge, if you recall in the book of Numbers, these are cities that people go to if they've committed a crime, specifically a crime where the punishment is death, and more importantly, if they committed manslaughter and they need a place for sanctuary, they would come to these places and they would be able to stay there in those places. But if they ever left that place, they could be killed, and the blood feud would end with their death. And so this was a serious law. This was a law that, again, it was going on all throughout the time of the kings, that these cities of refuge continue. And that is, the Levites were also in those cities too. Maybe really importantly, they were in those cities because those cities, number one, had people who were kind of on the run, if you will, but also they're not tribal portions. They're in a tribe within the geographical boundary of the tribe, but they're not really the tribes. They're cities of refuge that the tribe really probably wants to control, because who wants to have a piece of your territory that's not under your control? But they are not really run by the tribe. All right, we're not done though. It's continuing.
Okay. And out of the, where are we? Sorry. The
Yeah.
sons of Issachar, Tola, Puah, Yashuv, and Shimron, 4. The sons of Issachar, Tola, Puah, Shashub, and Shimron, 4. The sons of Tola, Uzi, Raphiah, Yeriel, Yamai, Ifsam, Shemuel, chiefs of their clans, men of substance according to their lines. Their number in the days of David was 22,600.
And so we're out of the Levites now, and now we've come to the next tribe that they're gonna give us a list of their numbers, which is the tribe of Issachar. Now, again, these numbers seem very reasonable in the book of Chronicles, that these tribes could have been around that large. So these are not numbers like that we had in Exodus, where we're like, how were there 600,000 men that came out of Egypt. That seems like a number that's a little too large. Some people think it's based on the numbers later on in Chronicles without considering the mathematics of it, which are that the people would have been, there would have been a lot more people. If you started out with that many people, you'd have a lot more people now. You know, if they didn't consider the exponential growth, then maybe the numbers that came out of Exodus are more reflective of what the population was during this time, which would have been literally 500 years later, or 400 years later. All right.
The sons of Uzi, Israiah, and the sons of Israiah, Michael, Obadiah, Joel, and Ishiah, 5. All of them were chiefs. And together with them, by their lines, according to their clans, were units of the fighting force, 36,000, for they had many wives and sons. Their kindred belonging to all the families of Issachar were in all 87,000 men of substance. They were all registered by genealogy.
So that's the tribe of Issachar, which is kind of in the center of Israel, in the modern day, like in the area around the Galilee today. That's where the tribe of Issachar was.
The sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, and Yediael, 3. Now we're stuck again. The sons of Bela, Esbon, Uzi, Uziel, Yeremot, and Eri, 5. Chiefs of clans, men of substance, registered by genealogy, 22,034. The sons of Becher, Zemirah, Joash, Eliezer, Eloenai, Omri, Yeremot, Abiyah, Anatot, and Elamet. All of these were the sons of Becher. They're stuck.
Wow. Did it move now?
I'm okay. Now it's gone. And they were registered by genealogy according to their lines as chief of their clans, men of substance, 22,200. The sons of Yediael, Bilhan, and the sons of Bilhan, Yeush, Benjamin, Ehud, Chenanah, Zetan, Tarshish, and Ahishahar. All these were the sons of Yediael, chiefs of the clan, men of substance. Stuck again.
I'm gonna have to, hopefully when we're done, we'll get it. I don't want to reinstall Zoom for everybody, but we'll okay. Here we go.
The son, okay. And Shupim and Hupim were the sons of Ir, Hushim the sons of Aher, the sons of Naphtali, Yaziel, Guni, Yezer, and Shalom, the descendants of Bilhah. The sons of Manasseh, Asriel, whom his Aramean concubine bore, she bore Machir, the father of Gilead. And Machir took wives for Hupim and for Shupim. The name of his sister was Maacah, and the name of the second was Zelophehad, and Zelophehad had daughters.
Yeah. Now this is interesting because as we go through the tribe of Manasseh, we get these really interesting stories of women. Well, first we read about an Aramean concubine who had some of the kids. And we know that Gilad, one of the ancestors of this area of Gilad, which is the area where Elijah is from, right? We call him Giladi. He's a Gileadite. That they had Aramean ancestry, at least on their mom's side. And we also read about the daughters of Zelophehad, who Judith just taught about the daughters of Zelophehad. Again, we don't have much information about them other than they were allowed to have their father's tribal portion, as long as they married into that same tribe. They had to stay within the tribe of Manasseh. They couldn't marry outside, otherwise they'd give up their property. But as long as they married within their tribe, they could inherit it and then pass it on through their husband, and then through their children that they would stay in the tribe of Manasseh. So that's confirmation that at least during the time of Chronicles, they understood that this was really important. And so we read about a couple women, because we also are now reading about Maacah.
And Maacah, the wife of Machir, bore a son, and she named him Peresh. And the name of his brother was Sheresh. His sons were Ulam and Rekha. The sons of Ulam, Bedan. These were the sons of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh. And his sister Hamaleketh brought Ishod, Abiezer, and Mahlah. The sons of Shemidah were Ahian, Shechem, Lihi, and Aniah.
And by the way, what's with this? His sister Hamolechet, uh,
She's got Molech in her name.
well, she's got Molech, but it also could be Molechet from, from being Malka, right? Being a queen.
Ah.
But what's interesting about it, well, that's where the word Molech comes from too. It means king.
Mhm.
So he's the king god. He's not our king god, and he's
Mm.
becomes synonymous with with the devil, and like Baal does too. Yeah, but these women pop up in the lineage of Manasseh in an interesting way, which seems like maybe they had more of a matriarchal situation going on in the tribe of Manasseh. I mean, this is a few times, and we never have it. I mean, virtually never have it in any of the other tribes, discussions of who the women were. And again, maybe it's some clarity of why we even have the discussion of the daughters of Zelophehad in the Bible, in the book of Numbers. But you can see here in Chronicles, it's still going on, or it's still being recounted, not just the daughters of Zelophehad, but these other women in the tribe of Manasseh, which again is this part of Manasseh is in the Golan, which is, as we mentioned before, very critical part of the land of Israel, because it's right on the border with Aram, with the Arameans, which is why there's an Aramean concubine. They're in the area, the Arameans, but it's also an area we talked about before. When King David establishes his dynasty, that's where he goes to battle. He goes to battle first in the area of Gilad in the Golan Heights. That's where he really makes his first conquests, and kind of establishes himself. And as we might say too, there's an interesting connection between this part of the country and the tribe of Judah. There's marriages between them, and there also is political affiliations, which might be because of those marriages. There are connections between King David and this area, which is again on the other side, the complete northern end of the kingdom. And to some extent, of course, it helps strengthen his kingdom by having those connections to the far northern reaches of his kingdom. All right.
The sons of Ephraim, Shutelah, his son Bered, his son Tahat, his son Eliadah, his son Tahat, his son Zavad, his son Shutelah, also Ezer and Eliab. The residents of Gad, born in the land, killed them because they had gone down to take their cattle. And Ephraim their father mourned many days, and his brothers came to comfort him. He
Okay,
cohabited.
hold a second. Before we go any further, that's a weird story because it's like a cattle rustling story. Sounds like a cowboy kind of thing. That this happens. Now, it says that Ephraim, I'm only going to say this because because this little line here, this little line is problematic on a major level, like a huge level. Huge level. And we don't really know what to do with it. We don't. I'm just going to tell you. I know this seems like, oh, there's this lineage and there's a bunch of people mentioned and it doesn't. This line is really tough. Does anyone know why this line's really tough? I mean, it explodes Israelite history. This one little line. Anybody? Anybody? Anybody have any guesses? You're very quiet. I hope you're there. Anybody have any guesses why the sons of Ephraim having a problem with the residents of Gath, who, by the way, are Philistines, but that's not an issue. It's not the fact that the residents of Gath have a problem with Ephraim and his sons. Anybody have any question about that? I'll only put it this way. I already said this has to do with the history of the Jewish people, of the Israelites. Anybody? These people are not supposed
How
to
about
be.
a little hint?
They're not supposed to be there. Ephraim and his sons are not supposed to be there. Where are Ephraim and his sons? Where was Ephraim born? According to the book of Genesis, Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh.
In Egypt.
Yeah. The heck are they doing in the land of Israel?
Hmm.
This is a line that a lot of people have pointed to, not a lot, because you didn't know it, but this is a line that a lot of people are puzzled by because it seems to upend the idea that at least all the people were in Egypt. But what was really important is if any of the people are supposed to be in Egypt, it's supposed to be Joseph's kids because he's the second of the Pharaoh. So how does this happen? How is this story happening? Now you could say, well, the sons of Ephraim are not like his sons, his descendants, but that's not what it says. It says Ephraim mourned their father, Ephraim, their father mourned them for many days. If this story is part of the Ephraimite history, then how is Ephraim not in the land of Egypt?
I don't know. You could only assume that they're descendants, right? They have the same name.
I understand, but this is Ephraim, their father.
I
And
know.
it
I know.
seems as though we got a little bit of a problem. So you know, I, we don't know. We don't know. It's you know, the answers that the answer the traditionalists would get. First of all, most people don't read the book of Chronicles and are in the Orthodox world anyways. They're not really familiar with it. There's not a lot in here that, you can see it's a lot of genealogies. It's not, it's not necessarily, there's no laws here. There's not a lot of material here for religious people to mine for religious.
This is like reading Ancestry.com.
And by the way, we're almost done with this. We're gonna finish this today. I promise. There's not gonna be really many begots after the chapter 9. Promise.
That's good to know.
But so yes, I wanted to get through it in one class. You can't do it in one class. You got to do it in two. But it's 9 chapters. But I will tell you that this little line here is a monkey. It's a problem for people who are maximalists because why does Ephraim have kids in the land of Israel? So again, the traditional answer is it's a different Ephraim. It's not the Ephraim who's the son of Joseph. But we have these ancestry stories here about Genesis, which don't seem to talk about anybody else other than these ancestors. So it's a little bit of a problem. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to, there's even Midrashim that Ephraim left Egypt and went to live in the land of Israel, and this kind of stuff happened. And they came back and they ended up being part of the people that left, because we know Ephraim is in the tribal lists in Numbers. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I have no answers other than I want you to be aware that this is here. And when you hear people talk about, yeah, but there's stuff in the Bible that doesn't lend itself to that all the tribes left Egypt, or that they were in Egypt. This is the one. This is like the most obvious. Look, that's not this is the most obvious story. The most obvious piece is that it doesn't seem doesn't seem to be physically possible for those kind of numbers to have left Egypt. It just couldn't have sustained that many people in the desert. There's just not enough room. There's not enough food. There's not enough. It couldn't have been millions of people that had left Egypt. That's the biggest piece. And we have no archaeological evidence for it. Not that we would necessarily have had archaeological evidence 3,000 years later for people who were clearly, according to the Bible, living off the land and living in Sukkot like we do at this time of year. All that good stuff wouldn't have had the remnants of it. But there might have been something left, or there might have been a better indication of, like, and of course we have different stories about how they came in to the land of Israel, slightly different journey, paths of the journey. Look, I don't know what to tell you other than I want you to see a story that, like people have pointed out, what is this? This is the one. And again, I didn't know it until I went to college, till I here in San Diego, having memories of biblical studies. I didn't know this existed. I didn't know. Nobody told me there's a line about Ephraim in the book of Chronicles which places him in the land of Israel. Never had. No one ever told me that. Probably nobody ever, knew it or went into detail on it. But it's not fair for me to teach you the Bible and to expose you to the Bible and read through the book of Chronicles and just skip over that. So it's not a story of, well, maybe it is a story of some guys who got into trouble rustling cows, a cowboy story, but that's not why it's here. Or that's if that's why it's here, it's more problematic than telling us a little story about some guys who got into trouble. All righty.
He cohabited with his wife, who conceived and bore a son, and she named him Beriah because it occurred when there was misfortune in his house. His daughter was Shearah, who built both Lower and Upper Beth Horon and Uzen Shearah. His son Rapha, his son Resheph, his son Telah, his son Tahan, his son Ladan, his son Amihud, his son Elishama, his son Non, his son Joshua.
Yeah, and that's the guy, Joshua ben Nun. So if you thought that it's a different Ephraim, and if you thought that, like, historically or chronologically, that's the guy. That's the guy who takes us into the land. So how could Joshua have been in Egypt and yet he's here in this list of Ephraimites? Other than, again, maybe there was some type of war against the Canaanites during that period, and Joshua was there for that. Was he also there in Egypt? Well, Exodus sure says he was. Numbers sure says he was. So it's the same guy. That's the same Ephraim. It's weird. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's not a different Ephraim. Not that guy. That's Joshua ben Nun. All right, here we go.
Their possessions and settlements were Bethel and its dependencies, and on the east Naaran, and on the west Gezer and its dependencies, Shechem and its dependencies, and Ayah and its dependencies. Also along the borders of the Manassites, Beth-shean and its dependencies, Ta'anak and its dependencies, Megiddo and its dependencies, Dor and its dependencies. In these dwelt the sons of Joseph, son of Israel. The sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, and their sister Sarah. The sons of Beriah, Hever and Malchiel, who was the father of Birzai. Hever begot Yaflet, Shomer, Hotam, and their sister Shua. The sons of Yaflet, Pasach, Bimhal, and Ashvat. These were the sons of Yaflet. The sons of Shemer, Ahi, Roga, Huva, and Aram. The sons of Helem, his brother, Zophah, Imnah, Shelesh, and Amal. The sons of Zophah, Sua, Harnefer, Shual, Beri, Imrah, Bezer, Hod, Shema, Shilshah, Itran, and Berah. The sons of Yeter, Yefunah, Pispa, and Arah. The sons of Ulah, Arah, Haniel, and Rizia. All these men of Asher, chiefs of the clans, select men, men of substance, head of the chieftains. And they were registered by genealogy according to fighting force. These men numbered 26,000.
Okay. All right. 2 more chapters of genealogies of the tribes. Nothing really in there to point out as far as significant either anachronistic problems or stories within the story, or interesting cases of women having a bigger role in our history than we maybe thought. Now we get into the tribe of Benjamin.
Benjamin begot Bela, his firstborn, Ashbel the second, Ahara the third, Noha the fourth, and Rapha the fifth. And Bela had sons, Adar, Gerah, Avihud, Abishua, Naaman, Ahoa, Gerah, Shephupan, and Huram. These were the sons of Ehud. They were the chiefs of clans of the inhabitants of Geva, and they were exiled to Manahat. Naaman, Ahijah, and Gera, he exiled them and begot Uzzah and Ahihud. And Shaharaim had sons in the country of Moab after he had sent away Hushim and Barah, his wives. He had sons by Hodesh, his wife, Yavav, Zivia, Mesha, Malkam, Yeuz, Sakia, and Mirmah. These were his sons, chiefs of clans. He also begot by Hushim, Avituf, and Elpaal. The sons of Elpaal, Ever, Misham, and Shemed, who built Ono and Lod with its dependencies. And Beriah and Shema, they were chiefs of clans of the inhabitants of Ayalan, who put to flight the inhabitants of Gad. And Achio, Shashak, and Yeramot. Zebadiah, Arad, Eder, Michael, Ishva, and Yoha were the sons of Beriah. Zebadiah, Meshulam, Hizki, Hever, Ishmerai, Isliah, and Yovav were the sons of Elpaal. Yakim, Zikri, Zavdi, Elenai, Zelatai, Eliel, Adiyah, Bariah, and Shimrat were the sons of Shimei. Ishpan, Ever, Eliel, Abdon, Zikri, Hanan, Hananiah, Elam, Anatiah, Ifdeah, and Penuel were the sons of Shashat. Shamsharai, Shahariah, Ataliah, Yaarashaiah, Elijah, and Zikri were the sons of Yeroham. These were the chiefs of the clans according to their lines. These chiefs dwelt in Jerusalem.
And again, the tribe of Benjamin is a tribe where Jerusalem was. We sometimes forget that because we read about the king and his family. We read about the Kohanim and their families lived in Jerusalem, but it was the tribe of Benjamin. And so again, the Benjaminites, that's their city. That's their city. And that's why there were a lot of Benjaminites in that area as well, which is why also Benjaminites were not part of the lost tribes, because they were in Jerusalem when it gets exiled, which is why Mordecai and Esther, who are from the tribe of Benjamin, are accounted for and are still living in the land of Persia and are still Benjaminites and still recognized as Benjaminites. They didn't disappear either.
The father of Gibeon dwelt in Gibeon, and the name of his wife was Maacah. His firstborn son, Abdon, Then Zur, Kish, Baal, Nadab, Gedor, Ahio, Zecher. Miklot begot Shemaiah, and they dwelt in Jerusalem opposite their kindred with their kindred. Ner begot Kish, Kish begot Saul, Saul begot Jonathan, Malchishua, Anidadav, and Eshbaal. And the son of Jonathan was Meriv Baal, and Meriv Baal begot Micah. The sons of Micah, Piton, Melech, Ta'areah, and Ahaz. Ahaz begot Jehoiada, and Jehoiada begot Elamet, Azmavet, and Zimri. Zimri begot Mozab. Mozab begot Pineah. His son Rapha, his son Eliasa, his son Azel. Azel had 6 sons, and these are their names: Azrikam, Bachiru, Ishmael, Sheariah, Obadiah, and Hanan. All these were the sons of Azel.
And you can see these are the descendants of Saul. Not all of them were killed. Not all of them were killed in battle, and not all of them were killed by David and his family. There are still sons that are around and have their own descendants. And so, yeah, the Benjaminites are important because they're King Saul's family too. And yeah, they're important because they were the first king, came from that tribe. All right.
The sons of Eshek, his brother, Ulam, his firstborn, Yeush the second, and Eliphelet the third. The descendants of Ulam, men of substance, who drew the bow, had many children and grandchildren, 150. All these were Benjaminites.
And that's the end of chapter 8. Now the association of the Benjaminites with bow and arrow goes back. We read about it in the book of Judges. They're very good fighters, even though they're a small tribe geographically and numerically. They're a tough tribe, and what's interesting again is that we're going to read one more chapter. We're going to finish with chapter 9 because that'll, like I said, that's going to take us out of this. We'll make a couple comments when we finish chapter 9. Chapter 9 is an interesting kind of like summary of the previous chapters. There's a lot of begots, but it's basically it's kind of a summary of the tribes. It's almost as if chapter 9 existed and then somebody said, yeah, but let's explain how we got to that. So let's take a look. This will be the last part of today.
All Israel was registered by genealogies, and these are in the book of the kings of Israel. And Judah was taken into exile in Babylon because of their trespass.
Okay, so this is weird because this sounds like it's the first line of something. And that's why it's almost as if, again, we have no reason to believe this wasn't written by the same person, but it's almost as if like now this is like, okay, we're going to summarize this and kind of remind people of why we're here, which is the tribes, northern tribes got taken, and then the tribe of Judah is going to get taken. We'll finish it and kind of come back and talk about it. But again, a lot of this is summaries of things that we just read.
The first to settle in their towns on their property were the Israelites, priests, Levites, and temple servants, while some of the Judahites and some of the Benjaminites and some of the Ephraimites and Manasseites settled in Jerusalem. Uttai, son of Amihud, son of Omri, son of Imri, son of Bani, from the sons of Perez, son of Judah, and of the Shilonites, Asaiah the firstborn and his sons. Of the sons of Zerah, Yeuel and their kindred, 690. Of the Benjaminites, Salu, son of Meshullam, son of Hodaviah, son of Hasanua, Ivneiah, son of Yeroham, Elah, son of Uzi, son of Mikri, and Mushulam, son of Saphatiah, son of Reuel, son of Ebaniah, and their kindred, according to their lines, 956. All these were chiefs of their ancestral clans. Of the priests, Yediah, Yoariv, Yachin, and Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Mishulam, son of Zadok, son of Mariot, son of Ahituv, chief officer of the house of God. And Adiah, son of Yeroham, son of Pashur, son of Malchiah, and Masai, son of Adiel, son of Yazarah, son of Meshullam, son of Mishulamit, son of Emer, together with their kindred, chiefs of their clans, 1,760, men of substance for the work of the service of the house of God. Of the Levites, Shemaiah, son of Hashuv, son of Azikram, son of Hashabiah, of the sons of Merari, and Bakbakar, Heresh, Galal, and Mattaniah, son of Micah, son of Zikri, son of Asaph, and Avadiah, son of Shemaiah, son of Galal, son of Yetutun, and Berechiah, son of Asaph, son of Elkanah, who dwelt in the villages of the Netophathites. The gatekeepers were Shallum, Akuv, Talmon, Ahiman, and their kinsman Shallum was the chief, hitherto in the king's gate on the east. They were the keepers belonging to the Levite camp. Shallum, son of Korah, son of Abisaph, son of Korah, and his kindred of his clan, the Korahites, were in charge of the work of the service, guards of the threshold of the tent. Their ancestors had been guards of the entrance to God's camp. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, was the chief officer over them in time past. God was with him. Zechariah, the son of Meshelemiah, was gatekeeper at the entrance of the tent of meeting. All these who were selected as gatekeepers at the thresholds were 212. They were selected by genealogies in their villages. David and Samuel the seer established them in their office of trust. They and their descendants were in charge of the gates of the house of God, that is, the house of the tent, as guards. The gatekeepers were on the four sides, east, west, north, and south, and their kindred in their villages were obliged to join them every 7 days, according to a fixed schedule. The four chief gatekeepers, who were Levites, were entrusted to be over the chambers and the treasuries of the house of God. They spent the night near the house of God, for they had to do guard duty, and they were in charge of opening it every morning. Some of them had charge of the service vessels, for they were counted when they were brought back and taken out. Some of them were in charge of the vessels and all the holy vessels, and of the flour, wine, oil, incense, and spices. Some of the priests blended the compounds of spices. Mattithiah, one of the Levites, the firstborn of Shallum the Korahite, was entrusted with making the flat cakes. Also, some of their Kohathite kindred had charge of the rows of bread to prepare them for each Sabbath. Now, these are the singers, the chiefs of the Levitical clans who remained in the chambers free of other service, for they were on duty day and night. These were the chiefs of Levitical clans according to their lines. These chiefs lived in Jerusalem. The father of Gibeon, Yeiel, lived in Gibeon, and the name of his wife was Maacah. His firstborn son, Abdon, then Zur, Kish, Baal, Ner, Nadav, Gedor, Ahio, Zechariah, and Miklot. Miklot begot Shimeam, and they lived in Jerusalem opposite their kindred with their kindred. Ner begot Kish, Kish begot Saul, Saul begot Yonatan, Malchishua, Avinatav, and Eshbaal. And the sons of Yonatan was Meribal, and Meribal begot Mikah. The sons of Mikah, Biton, Melech, Tahareah. Ahaz begot Yerah, and Yerah begot Elemet, Azmavet, and Zimri. Zimri begot Mizah. Mizah begot Binea. His son was Raphiah, his son Eleazar, his son Azel. Azel had 6 sons, and these were their names: Azrikam, Bocheru, Ishmael, Sheariah, Ovadiah, and Hanan. These were the sons of Azel.
Which, by the way, sounds really similar to the way the previous chapter ended. It's the same people, right? And so this is another repetition, if you will, of how these people got to be in charge of the area around Jerusalem, which is obviously important to the people who wrote Chronicles. But and again, the weird thing is the next chapter, the Philistines attacked Israel, and Israel, they're talking about the Philistines, the war against King Saul. Genealogy's over. We're going to go into the book of Samuel. So these chapters establish how the Jews got into the land of Israel, or let me restate that. Explains how the Jews were in the areas around Judah and Israel to the time of King David. Now, those were 9 chapters. 9 chapters. In none of those 9 chapters, taking us from, if you recall, Adam and Eve to this point, at no point in any of this story did you have any indication that the Jews at any time were in the land of Egypt. If you had read this and this was your Jewish history, where's Egypt? Where's the wilderness? Where's Mount Sinai? Where is Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy? Where are they? They're very absent, conspicuously absent, notoriously absent, completely absent. I don't know what you want to say other than if this was your Jewish history, which is what somebody intended this to be, there is no depiction of nothing. Now, you can make the argument it's not important to the author of Chronicles because they're basically establishing how we got to where we got in and whose ancestors are whose. So it's not, but how do you not mention it in the context of you're talking about Joshua, you mentioned Moses and Aaron. It's not like they're not there. It's not like the people aren't there, but the experience isn't mentioned. It's almost as if the Israelites never had left.
Is it possible that this was intended as an appendix?
Well,
right? So
but the problem is that there doesn't seem to be. This is where people they don't know what to do with this because the minimalists will say, and this is why the Exodus never happened. It's not in the book of Chronicles. And I don't think you can go that far. I don't think you could say that that's true. On the other hand, the author of Chronicles clearly isn't concerned with the Exodus, which is why it's not here. If he cared, it would have been a mention of it. But it is possible that originally there was a point in time which it's impossible for us to understand this because we live in the Torah. We don't live so much in Chronicles. We don't live so much in Joshua and Judges and all that wonderful history that we also have. We live in the Torah. And the Torah is the backbone of our laws. It's where we got all the laws. We were in the wilderness. We're given the laws at Mount Sinai. We're given the laws throughout Leviticus, all the way in all the laws that are in Deuteronomy. All those laws come to us from the Torah. But here there's really no mention of the Torah from Genesis on. And we're kind of left with, okay, well, but where's that fit in? So it's impossible for us to imagine that this was not at the forefront at a certain point in our history, that this wasn't the forefront of Jewish consciousness, that the Exodus was not necessarily what everybody talks about. Look, our holidays, we know originally Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot, those holidays, harvest holidays, had a backbone in agricultural. Their foundation was the agricultural importance that they had of people bringing in their offerings as thanks, right, for the harvest. Later on, they have the historical importance. Now, we can't even imagine this because, again, it's been such a big part of Jewish history for the last 2,500 years since the exile. But the conscious decision to assemble the Torah the way it was assembled, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, talking about a lot tomorrow, right? No, but it is. It's about the Torah and the Tanakh. It's about how we establish these books as as not just our Bible and our history, but like the basis for everything that we do. But if there was a time in Jewish history, like during the time of King David, where the focus wasn't the Torah, it was the life that people lived as part of a community that lived Judaism the way Israelis do today. So it's less difficult for us to imagine it because we see it every day. We see people who are Jewish, they live in the land of Israel. They don't think about the Torah all the time, to be frank, but they live it every day. They don't need a reason to keep the Torah because they do it as part of their lives. If people live that way, and they lived that way during the time of King David, it's less important for there to be an establishment of how we got the laws and why the laws are there. And it's just, that's what we do. It became an issue, and was we discussed tomorrow night, when you lose your homeland, when you are, even before you lose your homeland, gonna lose your homeland, and you know that things are kind of going to hell. And so you have to find a way to bring people together and to keep them linked through the Torah, through a text, through a narrative, through a common narrative. But if you don't have to think about it all the time, it's less important. It's so hard for us to think about it. It was, I would argue, it's less hard for us to imagine it today. It's less theoretical, it's less conceptual, because we can see people doing it on a daily basis. And so I guess open your mind to that. Think about Jews living in the land of Israel today who keep Shabbos because there's nothing open. They don't need to be told, you shall keep the Sabbath, Vishamru et HaShabbat. It's closed. The door is closed. I can't go in. I can't. The bank isn't open today. The restaurant isn't open today. I don't need to be told, keep the Sabbath. It's done. So consider that for a second. Consider that is the reality that our ancestors lived in for a long time. So long that they didn't really have to think about it that much. It's just the way we've always done stuff. So,
but Rabbi, are those not statutory laws, the closures?
well, once you have them, and once look, Ezra, as we talked about when we read Ezra, he's definitely enforcing law. He's enforcing it along the Torah. So it wasn't like Jews didn't think about that when they came back, but you can make the argument they needed to reestablish themselves around a text too. They needed to have a way, a covenant to say, we're not just living here, we're living here according to certain rules, and we're bound by these rules. And to some extent, we really understand that as Americans, because we don't have a common, though we have some myths, we have the pilgrim myth that that some people they still cling to it maybe, but we know most of us don't have ancestors that came here in the 1600s, and so we have a covenant, and we have a constitution, and we have laws, and we have a text that is our, and we have laws and statutes in the local, in our states and in our cities that we uphold, and it's part of our covenant. It's part of how our society is maintained. But the people who invented that idea, that we know, the first people we know of who did that were the Jews. And it was specifically when they came back, because while it seems like they tried to do that, at least the book of Kings tells us they tried to do that during the time of Josiah, it's met with maybe limited success. It definitely didn't last, because Josiah lives in the 600s, and then literally 50 years later we're exiled. So Josiah seems to have tried to do that with the book of Deuteronomy, which we'll mention. And again, we mentioned it when we read Kings, and we've mentioned it when we've talked about Deuteronomy, is that book seems to have been written during the time of Josiah to try to get people to follow the rules and to connect to Moses and to the lawgiver. But it didn't work. It didn't work because they were exiled, a generation later. But it was an attempt, you can make the argument, before they went into exile, but it really comes into play and it really is effective during the time of Ezra when they come back and when this book was written. So to get back to Judith's question, this might be this might be seen as an appendix, but not for an appendices, these books, but not for the reason that you think, because it's not that Genesis and Exodus don't exist, but they don't maybe exist quite yet. They're existing because the guy who puts this book together is also putting those books together too. But it takes a little time for you to have a Bible. Just because you have the Bible doesn't mean everybody's reading it yet and everybody's gotten behind it yet.
Are you saying that Chronicles was written before the first two books?
No,
And this is the way it was organized?
Well, it's definitely not written before the first two books, but it definitely seems to have been edited and put together at a time when the other books were being edited and put together as well, which is why maybe what the Exodus isn't referred to here yet, because even though Ezra is 100% cognizant of the Exodus, he definitely knew the Exodus. It's not like it didn't happen. It's not like it was part of the consciousness, but it's not part of the consciousness yet for people to say, that's why we live in the land, because we came back. That story and that kind of like complete taking in the consciousness of that narrative will take a while. It won't happen overnight. And it doesn't seem, we don't know that at this time, in this moment, when this story is being told, that needed to be told then, which is why you could say it's not in the first 9 chapters, because it hadn't become established. It hadn't become a foregone conclusion that that's part of our story. Not that they didn't know that it happened. I don't believe that. I'm not a minimalist in that it was an invented story and that there was that this guy didn't know about it. 100%, I believe he knew about it, but he hadn't needed to include it because he hadn't established it yet as part of the narrative that wove it all together and then gave people the Bible as we know it. It's very close. And again, the book of Chronicles isn't even necessarily like part of the same book yet, but the people who are doing this work, the people who are establishing our story and who are putting together the story, have started that in earnest. This is being done at a time, and by the way, this is being done at a time when people are still not, Socrates hasn't been born yet. Well, I guess he hasn't been born yet, and the Athenian democracy that we know of is like, the beginning of great philosophy and stuff like that hasn't happened yet. So just so you know, we're still older than that. Is it as old as King David? Is it as old as did Moses? Did this stuff happen during Moses' time? I don't think so, because guess what? We wouldn't have this story that we just had these last 9 chapters if that was the case. What's the proof? This is the proof. The Bible is the proof of how this was edited. To me, the greatest proof is not theories, but what the book says itself.
So you're saying the Bible is the greatest proof of the Bible?
Yes, and by what's not in it, and by what by what perceived mistakes are there. I'm not the first person to suggest this. The imperfections in it are actually the clues to not only understanding how brilliant it is, but that the proof of how they assembled this is here. They give us the proof. You just have to read between the lines. And again, the one thing you have to bring to it that I think is fully, it's not a ridiculous thing to ask you and anyone else to read it. Just bring human behavior and just bring the unchanging human nature to this, to not only understand what motivates the people to do what they do in the Bible, but also to tell the story the way they tell it and what they leave out and what they include. Just remember, people haven't changed. And sometimes, again, just keep that in mind, that the foibles and the way that we do things tells us more about, again, how it was created, because it's real. And that to me is why it's so important. It's so brilliant. it's again one of the reasons why I love reading the Bible and why my understanding of it, the more I learned about how it was created, it didn't make it less impressive. It made it more impressive, and it made me more of a believer that what we're reading is the highest level of human beings trying to understand. That's why I just said the thing about Greek philosophy. To understand that at the earliest times in human history, Jewish people were trying to understand why we're here, what is the nature of God, and why is it that human beings do the things that they do, and how to fix the world around us, and try to put guardrails on it so that we don't give into the worst parts of ourselves. So to me, this is why the Bible is so amazing, so brilliant, and so important. So again, I have no issue, and I hope nobody takes away, hey, wait, why did he just tell us about this story about Ephraim, and it upends the idea that the Exodus happened? I don't. If you take that away, then you miss the point, and you took away oh my gosh, I have my whole world shattered now. It's I can tell you, when I read that, I didn't stop reading the Bible, and I didn't stop following Judaism because I knew that. I only became more observant in my observance of Jewish tradition after that. I didn't keep kosher necessarily. No, I mean, there's certain things I didn't eat, but I didn't keep kosher the way I do today. When I read that, and it made me less religious, it made anything, like I'm saying, I'm more observant after I understood that, after somebody showed that to me and opened my eyes to the fact that, yeah, I mean, I never believed the Bible was the literal word of God. I never believed that. And again, we'll talk about it tomorrow night. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rosemary, for taking
Thank you,
us
everybody.
upon genealogy. And in the midst of it, you saw some stuff that is mind blowing. And that if you turn it off, if you didn't read Chronicles, you wouldn't have seen some stuff that is like groundbreaking and historic. And I think, again, it's very important for you to know. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And Hogs.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We'll see you hopefully tomorrow night, and then also, of course, Friday night for Shabbat in the Sukkah, which will be broadcast and streamed for those who are not in our Sukkah. And then see you Sunday night in our Sukkah at home for wine and cheese. So
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.